all, we'll have to try our best to win in September. But if we do lose, I think we've got to keep campaigning, and it won't be on independence. As it won't be like it won't just be focused on independence to start with, I think. But we do have to still focus on these social justice issues, which affect us particularly badly in Scotland, but also across the rest of the UK. I think we should join forces with down south, any sort of progressive movements. Well, I certainly would anyway, to try and fight against some of these injustices.
Make sure they keep the more devolution.
Well, yeah, the devolution, yeah, but I don't trust the Labour Party, I don't trust the Tory Party, I don't trust any of them, but I mean, I think we do have to have more devolution to the Scottish Parliament if we do lose. I think we all need to rally around that if that's the case, because I don't trust them to. So we might all have to out in the streets perhaps, we might have to really fight them, especially if UKIP get some elected representatives, which I'm fearing they will. But the struggle definitely doesn't end in September, regardless of how we vote. Well, certainly not for me.
I would have to say the same. I'll never stop, because I work with the politicians in the Scottish Parliament, the European Parliament, for to get what I need for the peers. So it doesn't make any difference. It does make a huge difference if folk voted no. Of course it does, but we've got to have the principles that will get better powers, enforce that. But it could be just a lucky dip once again, But no, I'll still be out there fighting and challenging, because the injustices in society are getting worse, Ken, they're going on about get all these disabled folk back to work. Where's the jobs? Who's fit for the work? But it's not just that. Disabled people became volunteers of society, new that became slaves of society through workfare. There's no work for them. It used to be that every organisation, or so many organisations with so many folk in it, had to take so many folk with disabilities. I run about taking capability hearings and take employment appeals, lodge tribunals. Every organisation, local authorities, NHS, you name it, businesses right now, all the folk with long-term conditions, disabilities are getting marched in the capability thing. There's no legislation to stop it. They introduced LASBO that dilutes workers' rights. So now if something happens in your employment, you want to challenge your employers, you've got to pay a fee. Then you've got to pay an even bigger fee before you'll even be recognised. That's folk haven't got the money. They've not got the money now. I fought Fife Council when all this happened to me years ago, because I wanted a better job. I wanted a job, I wanted to work. They put every barrier up front of me. It took me 5.5 years. I had to fight through every court in the land. I lost an appeal, I lost a tribunal, lost in the court of session before I ended up in House of Lords, and I won my court case, changed the UK employment laws, which introduced reasonable adjustments. But let me assure you, I never fought Fife Council that introduced reasonable adjustments for the like of Ian Duncan Smith, Esther McVeigh and Maria Miller, for it to come along and trash people with disabilities and dilute their rights. But that's what's happening, Ken. So I'll always be out there fighting. It doesn't matter what for. It's just my life,
It's kind of an easy one for me, because my job doesn't change whether it's a yes or a no. Being part of a union is about solidarity, so whether we're a yes or a no, my job will be to fight with whoever needs my help. At the moment, I go down and fight with Manchester, Liverpool, London about the NHS being privatised in England, and I don't see that changing if we get a yes vote. So for me, my solidarity and my commitment to changing things will not change at all. I will, if a yes vote, be up here making sure in Peter's written constitution that there's definitely no anti-trade union laws, and then I'll be down the next weekend in London fighting for the NHS to be saved down in the rest of the UK. So my job doesn't actually change. I still will be as active, maybe not as many public meetings, which as much as I'm enjoying, it'd be nice to get a wee break for a change. I've got to say, maybe 4 nights a week I'll get back into doing work in the house, but we're always fighting behind the scenes. Always. Doesn't matter who's in government, who's what government, we're always on the go. So my job doesn't change whether I'm a yes or a no. So if it is a no and Scotland is linked to the UK, then I still keep going on fighting. I go on fighting to make sure we save the NHS in Scotland, make sure we try and repeal some of the things because we have got Scottish Parliament and we have lobbied them before this referendum came along. So it doesn't really change much for me, I've got to say. It's just a longer fight.
I started off this one of the responses in this Q&A session saying that I was going to be the one who looked on the bright side. I was going to be the one who was being optimistic. That all ends when we start talking in terms of a no vote, or as I prefer to put it, getting it wrong in September. We cannot afford to get it wrong in September. If we get it wrong, then you can forget about fighting for social justice through the Scottish Parliament, because the Scottish Parliament will be loaded with responsibilities, stripped of authority and stripped of money. It will be a disaster for Scotland. We've got to get it right. What will I do if it's a no vote? 20th of September, I start campaigning for another referendum.
I'm personally going to continue in politics after a no vote and continue campaigning with Andrew as part of the Scottish Socialist Party, and hopefully campaign for more action on getting rid of food banks and helping people in poverty and helping the working class gain their rights back that have been stolen from us by years of neoliberal governments. In a yes vote, hopefully I'll be able to stand in solidarity with people from England and Ireland and Wales and all across Europe and help them campaign for their rights now that I've got mine. So that's all.
I was brought up in the SNP. I was born into the party. One of my very first memories is leafleting, and I went in and there was these big high fences, and in Inverkeithing it's notorious, but during the Cowdenbeath by-election then I had to warn people about the amount of dogs. They didn't believe me, and then John Swinney got pinned to a wall by a massive one. That's an aside. It was quite funny just seeing this figure pinned, and it wasn't the one with the beware the dog, that was next door. But one of my first memories, I was 4 years old, and I was leafleting for my mum. She's been a councillor in Inverkeithing for 28 years, which is not quite all my life, but almost. And I let a dog out by accident, and I remember thinking, I opened the big gate and I didn't shut it behind me, and I went to put the leaflet through. The woman opened the door when I was putting the leaflet through, and the dog ran out, and she went mad at my dad because I'd left the gate open. And I remember thinking, and I was only 4, but if someone was putting a leaflet through your door, you would think your gate might be open, so why would you open the door? So that was one of my first memories. And so, that was not a particularly good time for the SNP. It was we used to get spat at even as children in the streets. Things have changed substantially, but the 80s were a very unpleasant time for the SNP. And when I went to university, I didn't really campaign particularly, because I thought, my God, I've had a lifetime of it and I don't want to enter student politics. And after that, here I am again. I wanted to make sure it was my decision and that what my parents had brought me up with were my beliefs as well. But there's only been a small period where I haven't been campaigning for something different my whole life. That's never going to change, regardless of whether or not we have a yes or a no. I feel like there are so many people that don't have voices, that need to have voices, that their doors chapped and stories to tell that somebody has to tell for people that can't tell them. And, devolution has worked in Scotland. That's one of the things that gives me the most confidence about independence, because where we've had the powers of devolution, we've made better choices. We regardless of what political party we've had in power, whether it be the Lib Dems and Labour during the first 8 years or the SNP, we've made different choices from the rest of the UK. Now, people can point out and say social attitude surveys say there's only a 10% difference in your social attitudes, but what's different is how we vote in Scotland. We vote for parties that have different policies to the rest of the UK. So the Labour Party and the Lib Dems brought in free personal care for the elderly, got rid of the smoking ban. The SNP abolished prescriptions. All of them have been committed to the NHS and the the NHS being free at the point of need, and also to roll back what were already creeping privatisations when devolution came in 15 years ago. You know, and the no parties are talking about powers. But even before we look at the powers that they're offering, they are not fit for purpose. Because if you ask people in Scotland what they wanted a few years ago, they probably would have wanted a Devo Max option on the ballot paper. Now, none of them are offering Devo Max, because whilst I take polling as a pinch of salt, social attitude surveys are much, much more in depth and done over time. And the trend for the last 10 years, pretty much since the first term of the Scottish Parliament, is that people already then believed in the success of the Parliament. They wanted full powers over welfare and full powers over taxation. None of the no parties have offered us them. So even if there is a no vote, and I sincerely hope there won't be, and I'm working my hooky off to do that, if there is, the powers that they're offering are not fit. And so I will be there arguing for a devolution which has more powers and is more aligned to what people in Scotland want at the moment. And I will be a strong voice for that, a strong advocate. Do I think at some point in the future there may be another referendum on independence? I think perhaps there may be, because if we show that with those powers that we demand from the UK after a no vote, that we can do better and even better, then why not have the full powers? I mean, I say just now, that people already want almost all the full powers apart from foreign affairs. And foreign affairs are one of the things I think is the most abhorrent about the UK, going into wars in Iraq. So why would you want to, keep them, not condemning the blockade of Gaza? Things like that make me ashamed to be in the UK with a foreign policy that is so aggressive, trident, etc. So, I would say, if you want all these powers already, why would you not vote for independence? Because the ones that you would want to retain, if you examine them, might not actually be ones you would want to retain. But, I will fight for more powers for the Scottish Parliament and then set out a stall in the future. But what I am concerned about is that there are people in Scotland who are being scared into voting no. And that worries me, because a country which is brought to its knees in order to vote no out of fear. Now, I know that there are people that are voting no because they believe in the Union, they believe in Britishness, they believe in solidarity, and I totally respect that. I also know that people are voting no because they're too scared. And the culture in the no campaign is to inflame that fear. And I think that there could be a lot of regret and unhappy people when they realise that some of the things that have come to pass after a no vote have made conditions worse. And they're already talking about abolishing the Barnett formula, the Welsh, the SNP are always in solidarity with Plaid Cymru, but they get less in Wales per head of population. They want to have Barnett cancelled, and I understand that because they do. So that would cut £4 billion from the Scottish bloc. That concerns me, and I think there might be a lot to regret. So, I will be working, fighting every single day for social justice in Scotland regardless, but I think we might regret it if we vote no.
Can I just say on the back of Natalie's comment about Devo Max and the devolution plans that they've got, the Labour no camp have got a very big habit just now of telling me that everybody at the Labour Party conference agreed to what they had for their devolution proposal. That is not true. The unions made them change it. The unions were not happy with what was written in it. They don't think it's went far enough, and it's a bad day when the next person to come out and offer you a Devo Max option is the Tories, and it has more to offer than what the Labour Party are offering you. So be conscious of what happened in '79. I want you to read up about it. If there is anybody that's undecided, look at what they offered and look at what they gave, because it doesn't match. And that's what frightens me, is people will believe that and think that they're going to get something that they don't get because they're not being held to it. And people like us will fight till we are absolutely shattered and falling onto our knees to get these things. But it doesn't always get you there. You need the coverage, you need the people to say that these people are out the streets doing that. 85,000 people can walk in a street and it can be ignored. The whole of the country doesn't know it even happened because the media has decided that it's not happened. The government has got full support around the whole of that town, and you don't. It's just what people believe is what they're reading and what they're seeing. So what frightens me is people that are undecided are going to take this in, are going to think, oh, they're offering a great thing to me, I'll take that, that sounds like a great option. It's in between that and doing me. You might not get it. You're only guaranteed to get what you want with independence. It is a new constitution which you, the people of Scotland, decide.
But how can you guarantee that international businesses won't choose to leave Scotland if it's not part of the union and things like that? You can't.
I work for a worldwide company. I'm not going to tell you who I work for because I probably could get sacked for it. Being a union rep, I probably should think about that before I say it. I work for a worldwide company. These are the people that the Jim Sheridans of the planet keep saying, you ask your boss if you work for a worldwide company and they'll tell you it's not in that company's best interest to stay in Scotland. That's lies. It is within my company's best interest to stay in Scotland. Not only because it would cost them more to move their business out of Scotland than what they would lose if they have to pay any more, then the fact it doesn't make any difference to where they are. Scotland has so many things already in situ for things for businesses, and what they are offering for independence, and what Alex Salmond is offering, I'm not saying vote for Alex Salmond by any means because you don't know who's coming up, but these parties have still to decide what their policies are going to be. There is no Scottish Labour Party. They are just a tiny piece of the Labour Party. They are not registered as the Scottish Labour Party. That has still to be formed. So what happens is they have to wait until all these parties are formed. There is a year and a half in between Independence Day and the referendum where these things should all be happening. It should be the busiest and most politically active part of Scotland. Everybody should be forming their policies, working out who they're going to vote for. That first government that you have in Scotland is the one that makes the decisions on whether big businesses are going to leave Scotland, not because Scotland's went independent. You have not voted a government in. Who is in just now will be in government, not changing anything until the first general election.
But then if Scotland is separate, and I really don't understand how Alex Salmond can say that it seems to be cherry picking, right, we're going to still keep the pound when the rest of Britain says, I'm sorry, you won't be having the pound.
Well, actually,
Oh, goody.
in a recent opinion poll, 70% of English people said that they would be happy with Scotland to use the pound. I personally don't want to use the pound. I want Scotland to create its own independent currency.
For a start, it's not cherry picking. What the Scottish Government have set out is their position. They're not making demands, they're not making promises, they're not making claims. They've set out their position on things such as the currency and EU membership. Now, on all of these, we'll just focus on these two things for a moment. On both of these issues, there are at least as many experts who are saying that the Scottish Government is right as there are saying that the Scottish Government is wrong. And the reason the Scottish Government is right is because they approach the whole situation rationally. The Unionists approach questions such as currency and EU membership with the attitude that we are looking for the scariest possible outcome. Whatever is the scariest, that's what we will tell people is going to happen. They don't actually think it through and think rationally what would be likely to happen, given what we know about how politics works, how people work, how finance works, how the banks work, how the European Union works. Rationally, what would we expect to happen? If we look at it rationally, we find that the Scottish Government's position is pretty much spot on. As far as EU membership is concerned, there will be a smooth transition over the 18-month period. It will be continuing membership, and there will be bits and pieces that will have to be renegotiated, just as there will be bits and pieces that have to be renegotiated for the rest of the United Kingdom. It's negotiation. It goes on all the time. We have politicians and civil servants and diplomats precisely for that purpose. It is just what nations do. It's nothing to be scared of. It's normal. Like independence, it's normal. Again, the currency union. The Scottish Government has looked at that and thought, well, Currency union may not be what is best for Scotland, but on balance, it's what's best for both countries, on balance. And really, it's not in our interest to have the English economy suffer, and it is mainly the English economy that's involved, so I make no apologies for saying English. And the English economy would suffer. Professor Anton Muscatelli of Glasgow University has set out in some scary detail exactly how much the economy of the rest of the UK would suffer if the currency union was abolished. The threat to abolish the currency union was an act of political desperation. It was not an act of economic calculation. Anybody who is looking at it as a matter of economic calculation would be inevitably come to the conclusion that retaining the currency union is the sensible option, even if only for an interim period. So these are not claims or promises or demands. These are just the sensible positions that the Scottish Government has taken. And if you watch what's been going on, taking the EU, I'm sorry it takes so long here, taking the question of EU membership, for example, look how that has evolved in the past 2 years. The unionist position on that has evolved in the past 2 years from being, oh, you'll be out and you'll never get in. It's now come around to, oh, well, of course, you'll probably be in, but it'll take longer than Alex Salmond says, and you won't get the terms that you want. The EU will impose punitive terms. Why would they? So gradually it's coming round. The rationality will win out. Once the referendum's over and the rhetoric of British nationalism has been put aside, the language of diplomacy takes over and everything gets fixed. It's as simple as that. Everything gets fixed. Nations are doing it around the world every single day of the week.
To go back to your point about business, I mean, I think there's this false dichotomy in the press that suggests that businesses say that they will leave Scotland if there's independence. The closest that anybody's actually come to saying that is Standard Life. And I'll remind people, if they don't know, that Standard Life said if there was a yes vote for devolution in 1997 that they would leave Scotland, and they're still here. There is a lot of posturing about, and it's not just business people, it's politicians as well. I mean, the reason that a lot of businesses are in Scotland is because Scotland has a fantastic workforce. We are potentially one of the most educated countries in the world, certainly in Europe. There have been studies. Our education system is outstanding. We have 5 universities in the world's top 200. The productivity of our universities, the inventiveness, the medical sciences, everything like that shows that Scotland actually has a very motivated population.
It's not all about corporation.
It's not all about corporation tax, but the reason a lot of companies come to work in Scotland and put their headquarters here is on the basis of our workforce and the conditions that we have here. That's not going to change if there's independence. If anything, you have a more motivated workforce. I personally see independence as giving our young people the opportunity to engage more in a European manner. I studied law at university and then I went on to study international government diplomacy, specifically looking at the EU and Cyprus and Turkey was my particular interest in how that related to the EU. So I have a particular interest in the EU, certainly, and looking at that from a kind of legal diplomacy background, I was always of the opinion that the UK were overstating their position. Not only that, I went to various lectures at the Royal Society of Edinburgh with various figures that are experts in European law. And the chair was a guy whose name escapes me. He was from the Scotsman and he was very anti-independence, and he was extremely disappointed that there was almost a unanimous panel of people from various backgrounds, including a German law professor of EU law as well as Graham Avery, who is an honorary diplomat, honorary
of the
he's an honorary high hijab in the EU. How's that? I'll go colloquial. And he helped negotiate 27 of the 28 European treaties. And he said, you know, that Scotland could negotiate its position from within the UK. The UK government own study came out. They were meant to be producing a study once a month in lead up to the referendum starting in 2012. It seems not to have happened, possibly because their first few ones were really badly received, full of inaccuracies. And so they had two extremely eminent professors in law write a report for them. And the conclusion that they released, you know, the UK government were like, this damns the independence in Europe stuff. And they were like, yes, the 16-month period that the Scottish Government have suggested for the negotiation period is reasonable and foreseeable, and that will most likely be what happens. So we've seen this kind of movement, and I think Peter was right, this kind of organic movement, which where the arguments that they've put forward have been very much undermined. We're hearing other European people talk about it. And so, you know, with that in mind, and then looking at a leaflet I got last weekend, which said about the pound. Scotland will not be able to use the pound. Now, in one sentence it said Scotland will be out of Europe and etc, etc. And then the next one says Scotland won't have the pound, they'll have to use the euro. And I was like, wait, hold on, right? How can in one sentence you're saying that we'll be out of Europe, and then the next sentence we'll have to use the euro? This doesn't make sense. Now, the pound is ours as well. It doesn't belong to the rest of the UK. It is an asset. It sometimes hasn't been an asset, but it's a strong currency in the world. At the moment, it is an asset, and it's part of the assets of state that we have to divide. Now, if you want to look at where the decisions would be made on whether or not a pound would be kept, you have to look at the balance of trade and the value of the Scottish economy. And the value of the Scottish economy is that the UK economy is hugely, hugely reliant on inwards trading. And Scotland doesn't. We have the opposite. We have a balance. It's not a huge one, but our balance of trade is positive. Now that helps to stabilise the UK economy and helps to keep the value of the pound. So in terms of that, you know, there's a loss there. But also, and I mean, I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but it's a fact that new states do not have to take the debts of the previous state. There is no onus on them to take the debt. So if we became independent, we could technically say, it might not be very moral, but we could technically say, we will not take any debt. We will start as a country, and you're going to make us set up our own currency, or we could use the pound anyway because it's an international tradable currency, right? We just wouldn't have a currency union, but we could use it anyway. But we could leave with no debt. Now, think about investment in Scotland. You know, you have a country that has no debt. There are very few countries that you could say that about in the whole world, which would make us very desirable for business. But, you know, we're not going to do that. None of us wants to do that. We want to be responsible. But we have things that we can negotiate with. And one of them is if we want to use the currency, then we will negotiate for it, and we will negotiate the size of our debt on the basis of some of the agreements. And the UK government are posturing at the moment, and it's very argumentative. They could have asked the European Union for advice on EU membership if they wanted. The EU have said this repeatedly, that any position on it has to come from a question from a member state. So they would have done that. They want to keep us in the dark. And I think that's extremely irresponsible. And I think it's because they suspect that if they were to ask the question, they would find out that it wouldn't be difficult for us to get into the EU. And on the pound, you know, somebody in the Tory government, a senior minister, let slip to a reporter from The Guardian, and he said, of course there will be the currency union, it just depends on what the bargaining is. So, you know, looking from that perspective at those two issues, you know, there's lots to be very, very, very sceptical about what we're being told just now. And I think after a yes vote, we will have a grown-up type of politics and a good, better relationship between two equal partners where they're discussing what is best for both economies and both people. And I hope that actually independence brings us a more responsible relationship with the rest of the UK, where we don't feel as a junior partner, and we can work together. And let's not forget, two voices are better than one voice, and in Europe the UK and Scotland, if we wanted to work together on an issue that was particular to our geography, we would have a much bigger representation. So that's attractive to business as well, because you have more power in Europe.
Gordon McIntyre Kemp of Business for Scotland put it very succinctly, and I'll be just as succinct, in explaining why the currency union will not be abolished. He described the effect on the economy of the rest of the UK, and he put it as follows. Abolishing the currency union, and I have to explain that it's not a case of reneging on debt, as the press would have us believe. They want us to believe that Alex Salmond is going to renege on Scotland's share of the debt. That's utter rubbish. If the currency union is abolished, it is impossible for Scotland to continue contributing to the costs of servicing UK debt. It is impossible for that to happen, for the simple reason that the markets would look at that and they would say, hang on a minute, you have no liability there whatsoever. You are taking on responsibility for a neighbouring country's debt without any quid pro quo. Are you insane? And they would, Scotland's credit rating would reflect that perceived insanity. So it would be impossible for Scotland to continue to take a share of UK debt, as it's put. And the other repercussion from that, as Gordon McIntyre put it, was is that the size of England's economy will shrink by roughly 10% overnight, and their indebtedness will increase by roughly 10% overnight. That's a 20-point gap opening up. Now, the financial markets are not going to ignore that. It's going to be ruinous for the economy of our UK. And that is why George Osborne, after his sermon on the pound, ran away from Bernard Ponsonby, who was trying to ask him questions about the impact on the economy of the rest of the UK. George Osborne ran away because he was afraid of just such questions.